What do the words small and quartz invoke? Is it prejudice? Is it already making you think of skipping this video? Is it just flat out boring to you? Like a bad habit that you just can't kick? Prejudice is the norm when one thinks of quartz watches. Quartz is the second most abundant resource found on the Earth's surface. Is the abundancy related to its preconceived mediocrity? And with watch collectors, quartz really has a bad rep. It's always seen as inferior when compared to mechanical. But if you can put aside unreasonable prejudices, is it really that bad? It does 15 seconds a month. In the mechanical world, this can only be achieved by Grand Seiko spring drive. Oh wait, that's a quartz regulated watch. You know the universe is being flipped on its axes when watch enthusiasts moan about a mechanical watch running late by 10 seconds a day, yet the alternative quartz is hitting top shelf every day. It's a bit of an odd thing really, if you just stop for a moment and give it a thought. Why do watch collectors complain about a watch doing more than COSC, but then can't bring themselves to wear a quartz that does COSC over a month's duration? Being a watch lover myself, I totally get the appeal of mechanical watches, but let's be totally honest, is it really that much better? I suppose the answer could go either way, depending on who's doing the asking and who's doing the answering. Some real talk now. Is bigger better? Bigger house? Bigger car? Bigger paycheck? Bigger ho-hum? How about a bigger watch? Wouldn't you prefer smaller? In the 1920s, the average width of a men's wristwatch was 32 millimeters, which by today's standards would make it a woman's watch? So then were all men women back in the day? In the 1940s, 35 millimeter. In 1950s, 36 millimeter. During the 1960s and 1970s, 36 millimeter became the norm, and by the 2000s, it wasn't strange to see a watch coming in at 44 millimeters and above. It's safe to say that over the history of wristwatches, the width has steadily been increasing year after year. Yet today's watch pushes against this trend and comes in at 39 millimeters, and even appears smaller than this in the flesh.
Hello, my name is Martin, and I have a lust for watches.
Let's take a closer look at today's watch, the blue dial Seiko Prospex Speedtimer, known in Japan as SBDL087, or for the international market, SSC815. As always, we need to discuss history. It's 1927. A Canadian engineer, Warren Marison, along with J.W. Horton, was working to develop frequency standards for radio transmissions. Working with piezoelectricity, he wanted to count and display the number of vibrations of a quartz crystal in an electrical circuit, and inadvertently he had created the world's first quartz crystal clock. By the 1960s, Seiko had by then this time been working with quartz for a decade, if not more, and had already developed a quartz clock the size of a locker, a quartz table clock for the 1964 Olympics in Tokyo. Fast forward to 1969. People are walking on the moon. The Beatles' Abbey Road is released. The internet in the form of ARPANET sends its first message. The Montreal Expos baseball team and Sesame Street is created. And the very first quartz wristwatch, the Seiko Quartz Astron, is released on December 25th. It's a Christmas present to the Swiss mechanical manufacturing industry and would lead to the quartz crisis. Within 2 decades, it would reduce the whole industry to a select few groups that were basically forced to band together to survive, and its effects still last to this day. So is being quartz all that bad? Perhaps if you're one of the 1,000 watchmakers forced out of business during the crisis. Inside today's watch is a solar-powered quartz movement. So let's discuss the power of the sun. In 1972, the very first solar-powered watch was developed by an American engineer named Robert W. Reel. He had created it in his own home and named it Synchronar 2100. So yeah, what have you made in your house lately? The name Synchronar 2100 is an abbreviation for synchronous chronometer calendar, and the 2100 is due to the perpetual calendar being only good until the year 2100. In the modern day, the leaders in solar-powered movements are clearly the one and only Citizen. Their EcoDrive line of movements are class-leading, and their latest caliber 0100 has an annual accuracy of 1 second. That's right, 1 second a year. Why does this thing remind me of the Death Star? The Speedtimer has a long but not so rich history. It was originally part of the Seiko 5 sports collection and is recognized for being the first ever automatic chronograph sold in stores. Released in 1969 along with Zenith's El Primero and Project 99 Chronomatic, it's debatable which one came first in this trinity of chronographs, and still flares up arguments across many watch forums. The Speedtimer has lain dormant since then, and finally in 2021 was re-released under Seiko's Prospects lineup. The specs. The watch comes in 4 color variations: white dial, black dial, yellow dial, and this blue dial. For the measurements today: wingspan of 45.5 mm, width of 39 mm, 42 mm including crown, and a 20 mm lug width. Case thickness comes in at 13.3 mm and weighs 156 grams on the stock bracelet and has a water resistance rating of 10 ATM. The movement inside is a caliber V192, a solar-powered quartz with a monthly deviation of 15 seconds. Comes with a 60-minute chronograph complication with single press actuation. There is a date window between 3 and 4 o'clock, and it will run up for 6 months when fully charged. At 3 o'clock is a 24-hour subdial, at 9 o'clock is the running seconds hand, and 6 o'clock is the power indicator along with a minute tracker for the chronograph. Very subtle curvature to the sapphire glass, and along with the curves comes with a bit of distortion at extreme angles. There is AR coating in the underside of the crystal, providing it decent visibility in bright conditions. It uses Seiko's usual LumiBrite on hands and cardinal indices. The steel bezel is a tachymeter and painted black with red and white text. For case and bracelet, it's an all stainless steel construction. It comes with a screw-down caseback and push-pull unsigned crown. The watch is made in Japan and was purchased by myself in Japan in December 2021 for $400 USD and was released on November 6, 2021. The dial on this model is navy blue. The watch also comes in innocent white, yellowed ivory, and the perennial black. The white version is the most popular for obvious reasons and sometimes dubbed the Saytona. I can see the resemblance. You would have to be blind if you couldn't, but I don't really think it's a comparison that should be made. It makes the Speedtimer seem cheaper than what it really is by being compared to such an overpriced piece of. I had the option of buying any of the 4 and went with navy blue as I didn't have any blue watches at the time. In retrospect, I sometimes think I might have done better with the yellowed ivory, but it doesn't keep me up at night. There is a very fine-grained texture on the dial, and it's almost non-perceptible unless you see it in very strong light. The subdials are all translucent, allowing the solar cells underneath with access to the light hitting the dial face. You can clearly see the solar cell electrical conduit on each subdial, and I know it bothers some, but maybe it won't bother you. It certainly doesn't bother me and is a nice reminder that this is a solar-powered watch. The outside ring of the dial houses the minute markers, and printed in white along with the seconds and each fifth of a second mark. The Seiko logo is applied and the Prospex logo is printed. In very small text to the right of the 6 o'clock index is printed Movement Japan and V192-OAF8R2. The sapphire glass is curved and helps give the watch a classic vintage vibe. It's not so distorted that it would cause any frustration, but gives enough distortion to see the distortion clearing up a pleasant experience. Only in this crazy watch world is distortion seen as a happy moment. Each index is made of stainless steel and is polished to a shine. They are rectangular in shape and with a bevel on the inside edge. The cardinal indices have a pippa lume at the back, with the 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock indices being mostly composed of the lume pip with a polished steel frame. The edges are squared and each index is applied, however they aren't raised that much from the dial, probably about a millimeter or so at best. Would have been nice to see the lume spread all over the indices, but it's not a big problem considering it's still easy enough to read the lume at low light conditions. With the case size being smaller than usual, there isn't too much more that could have been done with the indices, especially considering the 3 subdials take up most of the real estate. It's a 3-handed watch with 3 subdials totaling 6 hands altogether. The hour and minute hands are sword style with lume-filled center blocks surrounded by a matte and grained steel frame. The counterbalance of each hand is painted in black. The arrow chronograph second hand is painted a neon red that matches the same coloring found on the bezel and 6 o'clock subdial hand. There is a small triangle of lume inside the arrow of the second hand. No bevels to the hands, they all come to a point and there are some jagged edges but only really visible under very close scrutiny. The lume is your stereotypical Seiko LumiBrite. Most likely to cut down costs, the application of lume is very sparse and very specific to the hour and minute hands. With the cardinal positions getting a pippa lume, the watch is legible at night, but it's nothing really to mention to your mom over a long distance phone call. Much like its original version, there isn't very much shape to the case. It's not going to win any awards. The tops are brushed with the grain encircling the center and the sides are polished. The transition from top to side is nicely rounded and isn't sharp, making the handheld experience a soft one. The caseback is fairly sterile with a bit of etching to tell you the specs of the watch. Sapphire crystal, Seiko Prospex, 10 ATM, stainless steel, and the movement name. Definitely an oversized crown for the case, and that's a good thing. It's easy to grip and has a good mix of polished ridges and brushed surfaces. I would have enjoyed it a bit more if it was actually a watch that needed some winding. The pushers also have polished sides and brushed tops. They feel like any other quartz pusher, just sort of mushy. Hard to really tell if you've actually started the chronograph if you do it blind. Overall, the case is a bit of a letdown, but it certainly does trace its roots, and sadly, it doesn't even do that well enough. It's a black stainless steel tachymeter bezel, and the text is engraved. Paint filled with red text from 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock, with the rest of the text being filled in with white paint. It's a nice bezel with a low-grade bevel that makes the watch sit comfortably and glides in and out of cuffs with ease. Unlike the other models in the lineup, this specific version is the only one with multiple colors found on the bezel. Inside is a V192 solar-powered quartz movement made by Seiko in Japan. There isn't that much information about the movement other than what's provided in the spec sheet by Seiko. It does plus or minus 15 seconds a month, can last up to 6 months with no additional light source on a full charge, and comes with a power reserve indicator. There is a chronograph movement, and it tracks up to 60 minutes in 1/5 of a second increments. I took the stock bracelet off when I first got the watch and have put it on a Miltat Asteroid QR for most of its life. The stock bracelet is in no way a horrible bracelet, but it isn't very much either, and I generally tend to shy away from bracelets, more in favor for leather or rubber. Alright, the pros. The size is by far the biggest pro going for the watch. It comes in nice and small. It's a bit thicker for sure, but with a diameter at 39 millimeters and the actual dial being 29 millimeters across, it's really a small watch when compared to the bigger watches we've all gotten accustomed to. It's easy to wear, and with its short lugs, it's going to be great on any wrist for any wrist size. The aesthetics are much in line with what you would expect of a watch based on a design from 1969. There are overtones of vintage, but also definite streaks of modernism. I especially enjoy the hands of the watch as they don't mess around and just give it to you straight, unlike some other handsets that try to do too much or just do too little. The solar-powered quartz movement is also another huge bonus in my life, as I don't ever really have to adjust the watch too much unless I've not worn it for a couple months, and the date needs to be set. I have noticed that the time can drift a bit more than the prescribed 15 seconds a month, but it doesn't bother me at all, and when compared to my mechanicals, it's like comparing a water gun to a waterfall. Overall, with marginal gains, the watch amounts to a great watch, and could even be a cornerstone for any collector that is looking for a quartz option that has a chronograph complication. For the cons, the sunken date window. It's been complained about before, and it certainly won't be the last. It's so buried in there that you might just as well cover it up and let it rest in peace. I would have much preferred a dateless version instead, as the legibility is so poor I don't even bother trying. It's just easier to check a calendar or cell phone, or hey Google it. The mushy buttons leave a lot to be desired. I have to do a double take to make sure that the chronograph is actually running, and visually it's easy enough to see on this watch with the neon red seconds hand, but without it I'm always a bit unsure and forced to check with my eyes. With those same vintage stylings found in the case, it does leave me wanting a little bit more. It's almost too simple and makes the watch seem a bit dull, and I dare say, boring. The case design of the watch is marred by its own legacy. It would have been much more effective if the design could have been updated and refined to capture a more modern Speedtimer feel and quality to build on its legacy instead of relying too much on it. Even then, the original Speedtimer had a more interesting case with subtle curves that weren't so straight and had some design put into it, but today's offering seems rather tame and bland compared to its predecessor nor any of its contemporary counterparts. Would I ever repeat this purchase should I lose or break the watch beyond repair? I want to say yes, and that I would go for the yellowed ivory version, but I gotta be honest to you and above all myself, I don't think I would repeat this purchase. It's true what they say about quartz, I suppose. It's just got no soul. I've reviewed the Casio T3000 on this channel, and I absolutely love and adore that solar-powered quartz watch. But I just don't feel the same at all about this Speedtimer. I can't quite place my finger on it. Is it the styling? Maybe it's the difference of multiband 6 and not? The watches are not exactly the same price, but it's not too far off that it makes me think that they could be compared. Yet here I am, finding myself hesitating when I see this Speedtimer sitting in the corner of my watch case. I would wear it for about 15 minutes or so, and find that I've taken it off for something else by the time I step out the door. I've given it multiple chances on the wrist, but most days it just goes right back into the watch case. Maybe YouTube influencers are right, and I wouldn't feel like this if it was the Daytona instead. Well, it's a great little timepiece that will work until you hit the dirt and probably work a little bit more after. And with accuracy that would topple any mechanical giant in its tracks, it's a mystery at times why solar-powered quartz watches get thrown into the loony bin. But here I am doing exactly that. I'll probably have to release this little fish back into the wild at one point in the future, and we'll have to take a big hit being used. But I'm more than prepared, and have made preparations for it by, well, purchasing more watches. If you like this video and would like to see more, you know what to do. Until next time, keep it real. Bye bye.